Hey there, and welcome to the wonderful and wacky world of Nigerian politics. In the season premiere of this show, I'm going to be attempting the almost impossible task of trying to break down the past 50 years of why Nigeria is pretty much the way that it is. See, I was born in the 90s, and for as long as I can remember, politics in Nigeria has always been chaotic. Now, a lot of the information in this show is historical and quantitative, just facts with the occasional feelings. In order to make sure this show is legit, we got our guys at Budget to fact check absolutely everything. So, grab a drink or 5 and get ready for a bumpy ride. I'm Layla Johnson Salami, and you are watching Polity. So, Sunday, October 1st, 1960. What a day. Nigeria became an independent nation after 46 years under British colonial rule. Now, we inherited what's known as the Westminster parliamentary system, essentially where the prime minister is the guy or babe that runs things, unlike the American system where the president is completely separate from the legislative and the leader of the government. Now, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa served as Nigeria's first and only prime minister, I must say, but in 1963, only 3 years into his time in office, a constitutional reform that was intending to get rid of all the British influence that had seeped up into Nigerian politics over the years led to several changes, and that included the complete disbandment of the Governor General's office, who at the time, by the way, was appointed by the Queen in England, essentially to serve as, her eyes and her ears. See, Nigeria's independence came at a very interesting time. Not only were so many other African countries also pushing for independence around the same time, but oil, the devil's milk, had only just been discovered in Nigeria, Oloibiri to be exact, a few years earlier in 1956. Look, I just made that name up for oil because, it comes from under the ground and seems to cause a lot of damage wherever it's found. Iraq, Venezuela, Nigeria. You see where I'm going with this. I want to fast forward to 1963. That was the start of the first republic in Nigeria. And Nigeria's first president, Nnamdi Azikiwe, was appointed. Guys, things went completely downhill from there. See, even before the elections in 1959 that led to political independence, voting patterns in the country had already pretty much been established along ethnic and regional boundaries. So during the 1964 elections, instead of issues, politicians were seen pushing ethnicity to the forefront. Almost 60 years later, and nothing has changed, eh? Now, by this time, the attitude and behavior of the ruling political class, it was really becoming concerning. There was this intense struggle to control, the state resources, and that essentially weakened the country, it was a new country at that time. This, coupled with a breakdown of the democratically elected government, gave rise to a series of military governments. In the first coup on the 15th of January 1966, former Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa was brutally murdered, alongside several other leaders, by the way. He wasn't the only one. And that was the beginning of hell within Nigeria's polity. His murder sparked a lot of anger in northern Nigeria, which was the region he was from, leading to a counter-coup by the North in the summer of 1966, July to be precise, and more murders. And that pretty much marked the end of the First Republic. So the discovery opened up the industry in 1961 to your international companies like your Mobiles, your Agibs, to pretty much come in and join in on the exploitation. Oil exploration. Now, prior to all of this, British oil and gas company Shell had pretty much the sole concessionary rights on oil exploration in Nigeria. But the government extended this to newcomers to try and pace production. And although it's really not that clear as to how the Brits kind of felt about this, we do know that the discovery of oil was, of course, a huge trigger for Nigeria's independence. I mean, as a resource, the Brits had been looking for oil for its own potential economic gains. So this would have certainly ruffled a few feathers. See, oil played a huge role in Nigeria's civil war that started in 1967. And that was sparked by the belief that that first coup that led to the death of Tafawa Balewa and also other people like the Sardauna of Sokoto who died as well. There was this belief that that coup was led by Igbo officers in the military. Aguiyi Ironsi, who took over in the first half of 1966 when Balewa was murdered, was also Igbo. So I guess that didn't really help the sentiment. Now, another reason for the attempted secession was that the Igbos felt economically marginalized by the federal government, and they pretty much felt controlled by other ethnic groups. Of course, think about it, the oil-rich Niger Delta region is located in parts of the southeast, and being an important source of revenue for the federal government, Igbos pretty much felt that they weren't receiving their fair share. They were also agitated that these revenues were being used to fund development projects in other regions of the country, and not in predominantly Igbo regions. During the war, by the way, I must say, the Biafran government tried to control the Niger Delta region, but the federal government was able to sort of maintain control and then use the oil revenues to then fund military efforts against Biafra. Guys, it's like fighting your next door neighbor, but then also using the tap in their compound to cook and drink to gain energy to go back and fight them more. Yeah. Madeaux. It's important to note as well that Biafra was not the only separatist movement in Nigeria's recent history. There were quite a few other movements as well, like the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, which was founded in 1990. So this is way past the years that we've been speaking about, but that was a movement founded in 1990 by environmental activist Ken Saro-Wiwa. The movement advocated for the rights of the Ogoni people whose land and resources were, and by the way, still are extremely damaged by oil extraction over the years. Now, Saro-Wiwa, and it's a very sad story, he was executed in 1995 by the Nigerian military government for his activism. And that's just one of the darkest stains on Nigeria's history. Now, the Nigerian Civil War ended in 1970, and I mean, there are no official figures for this, but it is believed that there were at least 2 million Biafran casualties. Now, don't get it twisted, oil was not the only cause of the Civil War. Like I had said earlier, ethnic tensions had been brewing in Nigeria for quite a while, and would pretty much come to define the polity until present day. So in 1979, so that's 19 years after independence and ending 13 years of military rule, Nigeria held its first presidential elections, and that marks the start, by the way, of the Second Republic. So according to Nigeria's 1979 constitution, for a candidate to be elected president, they have to receive the most votes nationwide and at least 25% of the votes in 2/3 of the states. But at the time, Nigeria only had 19. And in exact figures, 2/3 of 19 is 12.66. Now, there was a lot of disagreement over whether Shagari had reached that minimum threshold, because he won 25% of the votes in 12 of the states, but then in Kano State, he had only won 19.9% of the votes. So some people believe that the threshold should have been rounded up to 13 states, but in the end, Shagari did win in the Supreme Court. I mean, the elections were really close though. Obafemi Awolowo and Nnamdi Azikiwe really weren't that far behind. So these elections also established a presidential system in Nigeria to keep things balanced and to pretty much keep power in check. And this is the American system that we established. So with 3 arms of government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The legislature pretty much, of course, in charge of lawmaking, and then the executive is your president's office, and the judiciary is, of course, responsible for interpreting the law and holding people to account, allegedly. I mean, 1979 was something, definitely probably the closest that Nigeria has ever been to a runoff so far. And identity literally sits right in the center of it all. And just for some context here, Obafemi Awolowo won literally just a couple percentages less of the votes than Shagari had won. And Nnamdi Azikiwe was also not that far behind. Now, you know what? You can actually blame a guy called Frederick Lugard for how innate identity politics is in Nigeria. Like, seriously, you can blame this guy. Look, this guy was the last British governor of the Northern Nigeria Protectorate and the first Governor General of Nigeria as a whole. So before 1906, just for some context here, the north, east, and west of Nigeria had distinctive administrative structures that were overseen by the British Empire. But in 1914, some of you may have heard of the Amalgamation, but Fredo went to go and sign a document essentially consolidating the northern and southern protectorates, creating Nigeria. That's pretty much how Nigeria was made, and that pretty much gave a lot of rise to internal demarcation challenges. So the new country was then divided into 3 regions: your north, your east, and your west, right? Or maybe your east and your west and your east. But yeah, it was divided into 3 regions. And the north, predominantly Hausa, Fulani, and Kanuri. The western region, predominantly Yoruba and Edo. And then the eastern region was predominantly Igbo. So 3 completely different groups of ethnic identities, and even more in subsects as you get deeper and deeper into it, right? Anyway, so Sani Abacha creates 6 more states, making it 36, and that's the number of states that Nigeria has today, minus the Federal Capital Territory. Like I said, that's the de facto 37th. Sometimes Nigerian politics is like the most complex game of musical chairs. I mean, in true Naija fashion, the DJ has walked out and left and is now on strike. Somebody has stolen the chairs, and then the politicians just keep going round and round and round and round and round, and none of them ever leave the game. Anyway, there was now another coup in 83. I'm sure you're confused now and lost on how many coups there have been. But yeah, there was another coup, pretty much bringing the Second Republic to an end. And that's when Muhammadu Buhari, the current president of Nigeria, became the military head of state. By the way, that's when he was 41 years old, and he would later return to contest and win the presidential election in 2015 at the age of 73, and has been in office for 2 terms. Musical chairs, remember? I mean, the military pretty much then stayed in power. Civilian rule was attempted again in 1992, marking the start of the Third Republic, but that was really short-lived because the military basically nullified the elections in 1993 and took over again. Then in 1999, Nigeria transitioned back to a civilian government, and we've been a democracy ever since. I mean, there's still a lot going on, from corruption that's literally imprinted in politics, and the plummeting state of the economy that doesn't seem to be getting any better, and deep levels of insecurity. There are really serious reasons for us all to be concerned. So, since 1999, Nigeria has seen 16 years with the People's Democratic Party in office and 8 years with the All Progressives Congress in office, the 2 largest parties in the country. So the APC was actually formed in 2013. It's pretty much a new party, but it was formed out of a merger by 4 opposition parties that just wanted to get the PDP out of office, who, like I said, had been in power since 1999. And, the members of these parties, they just continuously just change sides. And it kind of reminds me of that one meme. You know the meme I'm talking about? Yeah, that one. Yeah. And yeah, the APC succeeded in 2015, and President Buhari then took office. Fast forward to now, we're in 2023, and the Nigerian economy has fallen into what many economists deem a recession, with the purchasing power of the average Nigerian at a dangerously low level. But this year is honestly looking like one of the most crucial years in Nigeria's history, because the presidential elections taking place may actually be the first runoff elections that we have in the country. Remember I said that 1979 was pretty close to a runoff? Well, this may be even closer. I mean, some people don't think so at all, but I really don't think it's that much of a stretch. The PDP and APC stronghold is genuinely being threatened by Peter Obi and the rise of the Labour Party. See, Obi's tenure as governor of Anambra State has become a reference point for his presidential campaign. This guy left healthy savings in the state coffers and developed a reputation for frugality, pretty much did things that weren't common or aren't common in Nigerian politics. That being said, there were a few financial controversies during his time in office, allegations of proper protocol not being followed, for example, but Obi has never been charged or convicted of any crime, nor have any of these allegations been proven in court. So yeah, the 2023 Nigerian presidential election is literally shaping up to be such a highly contested one. You have Tinubu of the APC and Atiku of the PDP, who seem to have their bases, but this time there is a genuine third force. Obi is highly supported, and several Nigerians do feel as well that it's time for an Igbo presidency. Reason being, by the way, is that it's believed that it's only fair, as the presidency has been zoned to every other region or different regions in the country prior to this, but the Igbos are yet to get their turn. But I've also got to mention Rabiu Kwankwaso. I mean, some people don't think that he's a strong candidate, but I think it's important to mention him because he's a former governor and minister running under the new Nigeria People's Party, and he is expected to win some votes in the north, particularly Kano State. And Kano State is one of the largest voting blocks in the country. So, I mean, it is hard to say how things are going to go on the 25th of February 2023, but this is a race that does feel too close to call right now. However, I must say, I believe that making that exact same mistake of choosing a president again solely because of ethnic, religious, or regional reasons reminds me of that all too popular saying. You know that saying when they say, like, if you do the same things over and over and over again, but you're expecting a different result, that's the true definition of insanity. Yeah, that saying. But then again, looking at the states of our country, aren't we all mad?